Hey, I'm Sharath. I work at Myntra and I lead our consumer digital products. So everything that you see as the Myntra storefront is something that my team and I work on. So over the course of my career, I've worked with a number of different companies, different sizes, different industries. And I think when you think about growth with the companies that you worked with, you get it in a couple of different ways. One is, just working in different domains, you begin to understand a lot of the logic behind it, a lot of the business models behind it, the practices that are prevalent in those domains. So when I think about ads versus media, social media, now in e-commerce, there's a lot of detail to learn about each of these businesses. But then once you go beyond that, you start realizing it's not just that. Each company has its own unique way of doing things. Google's a very successful company, as has been Twitter, as has been Myntra, but each one of them builds products in a very different way. And I think the biggest learning that I've had over the course of my career is it's not one method that goes with you throughout your career. So it's not like I show up at Myntra and say, hey, here's how we used to build products at Google. Build them at Myntra like that. Instead, it is try and understand Myntra's place in its market, try and understand the culture of that organization, and say, based on what I have seen, based on what I have learned, what would be the right process at this place? And I think that's actually the real learning that I've had in terms of growing with the companies that I've worked with. The role of the product manager is really key in three very specific things. One is discovering and validating the right product. You're not hiring them because you think they will come up with all the ideas. You're not hiring them because the ideas are all there and those are exactly the ones to execute. There is a process of actually discovering and validating the products. The second part is figuring out a plan to get these products to market really, really fast. I think even in the relatively short career that I have had, the world's become a lot faster, right? Consumer attitudes change a lot faster. New technologies get adopted a lot faster, which means that your speed to market is what's going to determine how quickly you learn. And I think that's one thing that has started changing, and product managers in most of the successful companies I see, they're getting really good at trying to figure out how do I take an idea into at least a testable product into the hands of real customers. The third thing that started changing is when I started out, I think that there was no particular toolkit for a product manager. You got product managers from engineering, business schools, various different backgrounds, as you still do today. But now there are actually a number of tools, processes. Product managers have their own way of doing certain things, right? Whether it happens to be a company that has figured out how to use Jira effectively, or Trello for that matter, or it's a company that's figured out how to use products like Intercom, or design products like InVision and Sketch. And all of these, if you look at it across design and product, I think beginning to get more formal tools to organize their work, to think about how their work is done. It sounds funny, but in a way, a lot of crafts, as their tools have become better, those crafts also start getting established a lot more. And I think it's the same with product. So our mission is to democratize access to fashion and lifestyle in order to help people look good. Now, if you think about it, democratizing access to fashion and lifestyle means bringing a huge selection onto Myntra so that people can find what they really want, right? And people's tastes are different. Even the same person over time changes their tastes. The second thing is being able to serve these customers no matter where they are. You could be on a phone in the middle of nowhere, but as long as you have an internet connection, this thing should work for you. And then once you've ordered, we should be able to deliver to you, right? So if you start thinking about it, democratization is actually a very, very long-range task. It's not something we start today and 6 months later we're like, done, democratized, we're going home. It's not that. So the challenge for us is trying to figure out what we focus on. Because it's such a large canvas, just trying to figure out what we focus on is a big problem. And I think that's actually been fun, because the good thing is working with a smart team, there's no dearth of good ideas. And like I was saying earlier, discovering and validating what you work on and what you build today is a big part of being a product manager. And I think there's a lot of fun to be had at a place like Myntra with that. I think the second side of it is, this is my first stint doing anything in the fashion industry. I'd done e-commerce before, but that was in travel. I'd done, very commercial products in the form of ads at Google, and it was across a number of verticals, including fashion, but it was a very different kind of product. An ad product is much more of a B2B product. And even when you have a long tail of SMEs, it's nothing like having millions of people visiting your site every day. And I think the last part that makes it challenging and interesting at the same time is just the market that we are in. I think if Myntra was trying to do what it's doing today, about 10 years ago, the game would have been very different. And in fact, if you remember, Myntra started then as a personalized gifting product, nearly 10 years ago, right? And then pivoted after a few years to selling branded fashion online. So there was a time that was right for it. And I think now we're beginning to see where it's not, us going out and saying, hey, please check out branded fashion online. We see customer demand in certain areas maybe outstripping our, interest or desire to do certain things. So there's a nice mix of the great ideas within the company. There is, huge amounts of problems to solve in the world of fashion. There's a large canvas in the shape of the mission that we've got. So all in all, I say, it's a fantastic place to be right now. When we look at customer feedback, we look at it in a few different ways. When I look kind of narrowly at how people are finding our apps, how they're finding our website, we look at sources like the Google Play Store, the Apple App Store, and what are the kind of reviews that people are posting there. We have the ability for users to send us feedback. We have a team that actually looks at that, synthesizes it, and every week sends a note out to product managers saying, hey, here's what's been happening. Internally, we call it the App Lab team, and they actually send out a little report that tells us, ranging from our app rating is going up or down, to a lot of customers last week were complaining about the fact that something was breaking in search. Now, sometimes we see it and we go, yeah, we know we did something wrong last week. It's already been fixed. But it's always good to know how much it affected your customers, right? Beyond the quantitative numbers that your analytics systems can tell you. The other side that we look at is we also get people who call into our customer service number, right? And say something didn't go right. The product wasn't delivered on time, or it wasn't as they expected it. We're not perfect, right? And we try our best to be perfect. And what ends up happening is whenever you see those situations, you've got to try and find out, are there patterns for which I can figure out a new method to solve it? And often the method to solve it doesn't rely at the very end of saying, when the customer complains, go and do this. You go all the way back upstream and say, how did the customer end up in that place? So let's imagine someone getting products in the wrong size. Now, allowing them to exchange it for the right size or giving them no questions asked refunds is a solution. But if you go all the way back and you say, how can I help someone who's shopping online figure out the right size for themselves? Can I use technologies like augmented reality? When I went from Google to The Guardian, one of the things that I took with me was the fact that I understood how the world of online advertising worked. That could become my contribution on day one. But I still had to learn a lot about how media worked and how journalism worked. When I went from traditional media to social media, it helped that as one of my products was TweetDeck, and TweetDeck is very heavily used by journalists. Understanding the workflows in a newsroom helped because I could generate some empathy for the end user of TweetDeck. But I had to learn a lot of stuff on the social media side, right? Because there's a whole consumer side to it that I know. When I went to travel e-commerce, again, I could draw back on some of the search work that I had done before. I could draw back on work that I'd done with the travel section of The Guardian and all of that. But travel e-commerce is a very, very different game. And that was the first time I was working on a two-sided marketplace. And so I think with each of these, there's always stuff that you can carry forward. Some of it is your knowledge of technology. Some of it is your understanding of how to solve certain user problems, of algorithms and technologies in search and other areas. But the other thing is, because technology is changing so fast, even if I stayed in the same company, I would have to reinvent myself. Read very widely, because at the end of the day, as a product manager, if you're trying to design and build products for some audience, that breadth of reading also just helps you understand many different contexts, right? Different social contexts, different cultural contexts, and so on. But if you want product-specific books, one book that I highly recommend is Inspired by Marty Cagan. There's a new edition of it that's come out that's actually updated, actually fantastic read. In fact, one of the books that's kind of lightweight to read, but packed with useful information on every page. The second one that I would recommend highly is Design of Everyday Things. It's a classic in many ways. A lot of product managers, product designers read it multiple times over the course of their careers. Yes, it's not about designing digital products, but the thought process of designing something that's used every day, the considerations that go into it, what works, what doesn't, a lot of it, at least at the conceptual level,